situation in Ukraine, and HMG supports the government in Kiev. Mr. Speaker, the situation on the ground is grave. As we can recall, on the 24th of February, forces of the Russian army, unprovoked, crossed into Ukraine's sovereign territory. Along three main axes, Russian armour has attempted to occupy Ukraine. Their plan was to reach and encircle Kyiv, encircle Ukrainian forces near the border, and invade from the south to link up with their forces via Mariupol. Russian High Command had committed 65% of their entire land forces and indisputably are in possession of overwhelming firepower and armour. It is estimated that at the start of this invasion, they had between 110 and 120 battalion tactical groups dedicated to the task, compared to approximately 65 in Ukraine. Their missile stocks gave them even greater strength to reach Ukraine at distance. However, what they did not possess, and still do not, is the moral component so often needed for victory. Mr. Speaker, after 14 days of the war, according to the Ukrainian General Staff, at the 6th of March, Russian casualties were assessed to include 285 tanks, 985 armoured fighting vehicles, 109 artillery systems, 50 multiple launch rocket systems, 44 aircraft, 48 helicopters, and 11,000 soldiers who have lost their lives needlessly. There are numerous reports of surrenders and desertions by the ever-growing, disillusioned Russian army. But to be clear, Mr. Speaker, these are Ukrainian figures, and I have to caution the House that we have not verified them by defence intelligence or other means. Of the initial Russian objectives, I can announce to the House that it is our assessment that they have been successful in achieving only one. And while Russian forces are in control of Kherson, Melitopol, Berdyansk in southern Ukraine, they currently encircle the cities of Chernihiv, Sumy, Kharkov and Mariupol, but are not in control of them. In addition, Mr. Speaker, their first-day objectives of targeting Ukrainian air defence has failed, preventing total air dominance. The Ukrainian armed forces have put up a strong defence while mobilising the whole population. President Putin's arrogant assumption that he would be welcomed as a liberator has deservedly crumbled as fast as his troops' morale. For our part, Mr. Speaker, the United Kingdom continues to play a leading role in supporting Ukraine. On the 17th of January, I announced to the House the government's intentions to supply military aid to the Ukrainian armed forces. The aid took the form of body armour, helmets, boots, ear defenders, ration packs, rangefinders and communication equipment. And for the first time, it also included weapon systems. The initial supply was to be 2,000 new light anti-tank weapons, small arms and ammunition. Mr. Speaker, in response to further acts of aggression by Russia, we have now increased that supply. I can update the House that as of today, we have delivered 3,615 NLAWs and continue to deliver more. We will shortly be starting the delivery of small consignment of anti-tank Javelin missiles as well. I want to assure the House that everything we do is bound by the decision to supply defensive systems and are calibrated not to escalate to a strategic level. Britain was the first European country to supply lethal aid, and I was pleased that not long after a military aid donor conference I held on the 25th of February, that many more countries decided to do the same. From right across Europe, the donations came. In particular, I want to highlight the Netherlands, Sweden, Finland, Denmark, Poland, Romania, the Baltic states, Belgium and Slovenia for their leadership. And we should not ignore the significance of the German government in joining us in a change of stance and donating such aid. Donations, Mr. Speaker, are not enough. The delivery of the aid to the front line is just as important. Here again, Britain is leading, because alongside Canada, the United States and Sweden, we have invested in building Ukrainian military capacity since 2015, and we find ourselves able to coordinate the delivery alongside our partners. As the conflict intensifies, Mr. Speaker, the Russians are changing their tactics, and so the Ukrainians need to too. We can all see the horrific devastation inflicted on civilian areas by Russian artillery and airstrikes, indiscriminate and murderous. It is vital, therefore, that Ukraine maintains its ability to fly and to suppress Russian air attack. To date, the international community has donated over 900 man-portable air defence missiles and thousands of anti-tank guided weapons of varying types, as well as various small arms. But the capability needs strengthening. So in response to Ukrainian requests, the government has taken the decision to explore the donation of Starstreak high-velocity man-portable anti-air missiles. We believe that this system will remain within the definition of defensive weapons, but will allow the Ukrainian force to better defend their skies. We shall also be increasing the supplies of rations, medical equipment and other non-lethal military aid. As with any war, the civilian population is suffering horrendous hardships. According to the Ukrainian Ministry of Education, 211 schools have been damaged or destroyed, and media footage shows Russian strikes hitting kindergartens. The Chernihiv Regional Administration reported that Russian Air Force was employing FAB-500 unguided bombs against targets in the city. And according to Human Rights Watch, civilians in Mariupol have now been without water and power for almost a week. President Zelensky talked of children dying of thirst. Today, the estimated number of Ukrainian civilians killed or injured now stands at over 1,000. The true figure is expected to be much higher, and I'm afraid worse is likely to come. It is for that reason that the UK will increase its funding for Ukraine to 220 million, which includes 120 million of humanitarian aid. This will make the United Kingdom the single biggest bilateral humanitarian donor to Ukraine. We're also supporting humanitarian work with the Polish and Romanian governments on the borders. As I said, Mr. Speaker, in my last statement, we still believe it is worth trying to build diplomatic pressure on Russia. This week, my good friend the Prime Minister met the Prime Ministers of Canada, the Netherlands and Poland. He also spoke to the leaders of France, Germany and the United States, and Prime Ministers of Hungary, Slovakia and the Czech Republic. The Foreign Secretary is in Washington at the G7 and also attended NATO foreign ministers earlier this month. And I myself only this morning met with the Ukrainian ambassador. President Putin should be and can be in no doubt that the international community is united against his actions. It remains strong and will not back down. As well as providing direct military support to Ukraine, we continue to bolster our contribution towards NATO's collective security. NATO defence ministers will gather next week in Brussels to discuss the next steps. The UK is doing its bit in providing military support and reassurance to its allies. We are currently supplying significant air power to NATO, including increase in air patrols with both Typhoon and F-35s under NATO air policing. We have also deployed additional 4 Typhoons to Cyprus to patrol NATO's eastern border and sent an additional 800 troops to Estonia. Over the last week, Apache and Chinook helicopters were involved in exercises in Estonia. And meanwhile, HMS Diamond has sailed to the eastern Mediterranean. HMS Northumberland is taking part in a northern deployment, and HMS Grimsby is in the Norwegian Sea, supporting NATO mine countermeasures. On Monday, HMS Prince of Wales, RFI Tide Surge and HMS Defender joined HMS Albion and RFA Mount Bays on exercise Cold Response, a multinational exercise off the coast of Norway. And HMS Richmond will be exercising with our joint expeditionary force. We have put more than 1,000 more British troops on readiness to support humanitarian responses in the bordering countries. Britain's contribution to NATO is significant and enduring. It's important at this time that in order to maximise our reassurance and resilience effect, we coordinate through NATO and the Supreme Allied Commander Europe. Few of us, Mr. Speaker, will not have been moved by President Zelensky's speech yesterday. His people are fighting for their very survival. His country is united against the aggression, and it is indeed his country's darkest hour. Yesterday I saw footage of a Russian armoured train bristling with guns heading towards Mariupol. A brave single woman from Ukraine ran to that train and shouted "Slavo Ukrainia." Unmoved, unintimidated by the guns, the woman's bravery should inspire us all. I know many of our constituents, Mr. Speaker, and our colleagues are fearful of what happens next. President Putin and the Kremlin continue to threaten countries who offer help to Ukraine. Their military campaign will, I'm afraid, get more brutal and more indiscriminate. But, Mr. Speaker, it is my firm belief that our strength to stand up to such bullying comes from our alliances. As long as we stand united, both as a House and as the international community, then the Kremlin's threats cannot hurt us. We should take strength from the peoples right across Europe who are standing shoulder to shoulder to protect our values, our freedom, our tolerance, our democracy, and our free press. That is our shield.